All right. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to all of you. I'm so glad that you decided to join us for this remarkable Antarctica Travelogue. I'm Mila Stroganoff, and I'm Programs Director for the Friends of San Pedro Valley Park. And we are recording this program, and so it will be available in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, on our website. JR has kindly agreed to let us do so. As we move along, our upcoming webinar is on Wednesday, March the 15th at 7 p.m. Not our usual Saturday, but keep it in mind. It's entitled Vegetable Gardening 101, and it's going to be with Loretta O'Brien. She's co-founder and director of Pacifica Gardens, and Loretta has been the garden manager and a part of Pacifica Gardens leadership since its groundbreaking in 2008. So I decided to spread our wings, my wings, and all of our wings into horticulture. And so that's what that program is going to be all about, vegetable gardening. We will also have a bat program with one of the most well-known scientists in the field at the end of March. And that I will keep hidden away up my sleeve until another time. Please write today's questions in the Q&A section. And some of these questions will be taken at the end of the lecture. We'll try to take a few because the lecture will be running a little on the long side, but we prefer to hear that, I think. So, and write any discussion or comments or whatever into chat. So we have two distinct divisions there between questions and just various comments. And I'm very pleased to welcome J.R. Blair today. He received his bachelor's degree at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, and obtained his master's degree at San Francisco State University in 1999, studying with the accomplished mycologist, Dr. Denis Desjardins. His thesis was fungi associated with Arctostaphylos in Northern California. Since then, he has been an active member of the Mycological Society of San Francisco. He served a 2-year term as president and was fungus chairperson for 5 years. He has taught mushroom identification workshops for mycological societies and outdoor education programs for many years. He was a lecturer of biology at San Francisco State University for 21 years, and the director of the University Sierra Nevada Field Campus for 11 years until his retirement in December 2020. And I must admit, I believe he's still active, very active, as a director at the field campus. So take it away, JR.
All right, thank you so much, Mila.
You're quite welcome.
Welcome, everybody. We're really happy to share my adventure with you to the far south. Just a little bit to add to my bio. Even though I retired, I actually came back and taught directed the field campus for 1 more year last summer, and then was helping with sort of maintaining things until they hired a new program lead in just a couple of weeks ago. And so the field campus now has a new lead, and so I can sort of relax and step back and kind of watch how that goes. So, but I hope you look into that. I know many of you probably have already taken some workshops and classes there, but look, if you just Google Sierra Nevada Field Campus, it'll take you right to the website. Besides mushrooms, I've just generally have been a naturalist over the years, including for example, birding. I'm like to go birding a lot, and I'm interested in birds. And I've been doing that since the early 80s as a hobby. And then while I was a lecturer at San Francisco State, I mostly taught classes about plants. So I'm going to be doing an overview of not just the place that you see, the list of places that you see on the intro slide here, but also talking about the different kinds of organisms that were there. So I have a lot of slides to get through, and I'll try to do it as best I can within the next 55 minutes or so. May go a little bit over time, and won't hurt my feelings if you leave. I understand that you might have things to do at 4 o'clock, but I will stick around afterwards for as long as necessary for people to ask questions. All right, so let me start off by talking about the journey that I took. So let me give you a little background about how I got into this in the first place. So I'm a member of the American Birding Association, and they put out a digital newsletter, which I usually don't read. But I happened to look at it in September of this past year, so 2022. And there was a notification that there had been some cancellations on the Antarctic adventure. And I thought, well, what the heck, I'll look into it. And the next thing you know, I'm in debt. So it was a very expensive trip, but as you'll see, it was really, really worth it. And I'm happy to be in debt for the adventure. Now, it turns out that in 2019, there was this specific trip had been planned and by the Rock Jumper Expedition Company, which is a birding tour company. So Rock Jumper Tours set this up. People went down to Tierra del Fuego. They got on a ship. They headed off towards the Falkland Islands. And then the company that owns the ship went out of business. And so they turned back. They had to go back. They went to Buenos Aires. They had to dock there, and everybody had to get off the ship and go home. Or the Rock Jumper people actually were able to put together some seat of your pants tours for people. Anyway, that was in 2019. So they say, okay, well, if you paid for this trip, you can just go on the next time, which would be 2020. Oops. Happened to be a pandemic that year, right? So it didn't happen in 2020. And it didn't happen in 2021 for the same reason. So of the people on this adventure that I was on, and we're talking about 185 guests on board the ship. Of those 185 people, about half of them had been in this 2019 debacle that was then canceled for 2 more years until they could finally go in 2022. And one other thing I want to say about that is that virtually everybody on board were birders, which is fairly unusual. Most of these Antarctic trips are a mixture of bird watchers and people who are interested in the adventure, or people who are interested in glaciology or other kinds of sciences as well. So anyway, so I flew from San Francisco to Panama City, to Santiago, Chile. These are all different flights, to Buenos Aires, and finally to this beautiful city of Ushuaia. Ushuaia is the southernmost city on the planet in Tierra del Fuego. And I just got to say, it's as charming as you can imagine. Now, this was in November. I need to tell you that, which in the southern hemisphere is springtime. And so, they, during the spring and their summer, which is right now, kind of things are winding down now. They have many expeditions, tour boats, ships that go down to Antarctica from this city. So it really is, during their summertime, is a port city for these expeditions. Now, it turns out that in the you can see there's some mountains here, that in their winter time, which is in June, July, August, they actually have a thriving winter tourist season. So people go down there to ski and ice skate and do other kinds of winter adventures. Anyway, it's a really beautiful city. I really enjoyed exploring Ushuaia. Since it's springtime, they plant the tulips. There's a little signpost to tell you that Buenos Aires is a mere 3,094 kilometers north of Ushuaia. By the way, Ushuaia is part of Argentina. This is a little video I took of as we were coming in on the ship. You get a good view of the city of Ushuaia. These red roofed buildings are part of the Argentine Navy facility that's there. All right. Oh, sorry. You just let that go one more time and then I'll dance. For some reason, I'm not able to advance in the middle of a video. Oh no, there we go. Okay, there we go. This is an old tugboat that ran aground once upon a time, and they decided to make it into a monument so that that people would know not to be very careful around the rocks and the reefs and so on. Now, I thought this was going to be our ship, but it wasn't guaranteed. Ours was a little different than that. But so here's some other views of Ushuaia. Really pretty little town. Nice. It has lots of great murals. This is one of a Magellanic penguin. Here's another one. This is the first live penguin I saw, and it kind of escaped. It ran away. I didn't get a good look at it. So there are a few. There's sort of a new awareness of the indigenous people that used to live there, the Yamana. And here's a mural in Ushuaia dedicated to that indigenous group. There are a few descendants left from them. Another view of Ushuaia. Well, I went to the Maritime Museum there, which is located in a prison. So Ushuaia for a long time was a prison community back in the early to mid 1900s. And so when the prison closed, they made it into this beautiful museum. You can see these are the tiers of the cells. And then in the cells, they would have vignettes like this one here. This is a mannequin of a prisoner in one of the cells. And they also used them for other displays. So here's a couple of rooms that to display the Expedition Belgica, which happened in the late 1800s, led by de Garlache. And they also had a lot of models. So here's a model of the Beagle. So the Beagle, which is famous because Charles Darwin was on this ship, stopped in Ushuaia and traveled through the waterway near Ushuaia. This is the HMS Resolution, which was Captain Cook's ship. And then this is the Endurance, which was Ernest Shackleton's ship. I'll be talking a little bit more about Shackleton later. And then this is one of the lifeboats, the James Caird, it was called, that played a big role in the Ernest Shackleton adventure. This was our ship, a little bit different. So this is called the Ocean Diamond. The company that runs the expeditions is called the Quark Expeditions. So they basically hire all of the crew works for them, and they do all of the programming, and as you'll see, some other things as well. Here are the details of the ship. So it's 124 meters long, which is about 400 feet from tip to stern. There were about 300 people aboard. So I mentioned 185 guests, and then about 120 crew, staff, and expedition leaders. Is quite adventurous, and it's very, very plush. So this was the room that I was in. I shared with a fellow from Scotland who I had not met before, but we got along at least for the 17 days that we were on board of the ship. And the beds were made every day. We got clean linens and so on a regular basis. We were served 3 meals a day. Breakfast and lunch were buffet style, and then dinner was always a sit down style, and very, very excellent meal. So the food was just outstanding the whole time. This is the main lounge, which holds a couple of hundred people. And this is where, for example, presentations would be made. But in between islands, we had 3 to 4 presentations every day. This is a fellow named Fabrice from France, and Fabrice is an ornithologist, and here he is talking about emperor penguins. I just want to say before we go on that the emperor penguins are very difficult to see if you can't get to the interior of the ice shelves during the winter time, because that's when they form their colonies. You've seen the March of the Penguins movie and so on. They have a really unique lifestyle. Anyway, they're very hard to see otherwise. And so that was the holy grail of the trip. So everybody wanted to see emperor penguins. So we were scouring the horizons when we got to Antarctica, trying to find them. So keep that in mind as sort of the buzz of the whole ship. Well, we had to do a little practice evacuation. And so they had these silly personal flotation devices in each room that we were to put on, and then we, as a group, marched to our appropriate life boat station, and we did that even before we left harbor. But that was the last time I wore that thing. The reason is that, and here I am in all of my my cold weather gear. You see this blue thing? That's the personal flotation device that we used on a regular basis whenever we were going into the zodiacs and going ashore. This image also shows you the reception area for the ship, and so it's very much like a hotel, floating hotel. Here is another image of the reception area with a bunch of people getting ready to board the Zodiacs. Now the Zodiacs, which you see here, they had 20 Zodiacs, and the maximum capacity of the Zodiacs was, I think, 12 people or 13 people, including the driver. We usually went with 11, so 10 guests and the driver, as you'll see. But they had enough so they could put everybody in these Zodiacs. We'd never used the kayaks. They were just for decoration, I think, or for the next trip or something. Anyway, there was some sort of bird off the starboard side there, and everybody wanted to see it. So everybody was headed over there to view the bird. I don't remember which kind it was, some kind of a petrel or something like that. You can see a lot of birds behind the ship there. Those are mostly giant petrels. So the southern giant petrels were the most abundant bird that we had following us as we left Ushuaia. Okay, this is one of the Quark employees and boat driver, and he was also, this was the historian on board. He's from Buenos Aires, and he's giving us a little a spiel about how to behave as people in the boat. Oh, by the way, if you look behind there, you can see the unused Zodiacs still stored on the upper deck. And then this is the typical, one of the two disembarkation points from getting into the zodiac. And then this was the other one on the starboard side. And here's a little here's a view of a loaded up zodiac. And then here's a little video of what it was like to get out of one of these zodiacs. This happened to be in South Georgia Island. Now the guys that are pulling the boat in there in the black, those are the below decks crew. They're mostly from Indonesia, and very few of them spoke any English, but I sure shook their hands a lot, because as you'll see, when people get off, they reach down, they help them off one at a time, and instead of hand to hand, notice it's hand to elbow, hand to forearm. Those orange parkas, by the way, were given to us by so as part of the deal was that we got to keep those parkas, but it overloaded my luggage, so I actually gave mine away. So here's a little video of Reese as the driver. By the way, Reese is a pretty amazing guy. He's an extraordinary ornithologist, but he was quite the boat driver. He never wore a hat, never wore gloves, and he put the tiller of the motor between his legs, which was really unusual. Most of the drivers wore hats and gloves and had the tiller off to the side. Here's another example of a high-speed trip on the Zodiac. This is Antarctica, where there were icebergs. I gotta say, I loved these Zodiac expeditions. They were just so much fun. And then here's a situation where we had to go slow because we were moving through some what's called brash ice, B-R-A-S-H, basically just chunks of ice. Now the motors were not any kind of danger, but sometimes the ice would get stuck in the blades, and then they'd have to back up and then move forward. And then here is a landing. So this particular landing was one of the harder ones. Mostly we were on beaches, but this one was on a rocky shore. This one was one where the people were advised that if they didn't feel comfortable with being sort of in harsh conditions and getting out of a boat with big waves and so on, that they shouldn't go. But like I say, most of the landings, almost all of the other landings were on beaches, and even people with mobility issues could easily get on and off. Now, this is what we did on every island. And on South Georgia Island, for example, we did 4 different landings. Antarctica Peninsula, we did 5 or 6 landings. So this was a big part of the adventure, was doing these Zodiac landings. This is the Quark expedition team. So these are the people who were the boat drivers, the presenters, so experts in ornithology and mammalogy and glaciology and history, and there's a photographer there and all kinds of folks. So anyway, a very, very a great crew for sure. This was a special event where we actually had dinner outside. So normally we'd have it inside in a nice, comfortable place. The tables were all bolted down, as you can imagine, and they also had chains underneath the chairs for in case we ran into rough conditions, which we certainly did later. But this was an outdoor meal that we had, and you can see them loading one of the Zodiacs on the back of the boat there. This was our amazing captain. He was not only an excellent driver, basically, of the ship, but he was also flexible, and he would take us places that he felt safe to bring us that weren't on the schedule. That was pretty amazing. We had really excellent weather, and there's really only one place where we weren't able to go. All right, let me talk about the places we went now. So our first stop after we left Ushuaia, which was right about here, we traveled through the Beagle Channel, which is a channel that goes from west to east, east to west, right through the bottom of Tierra del Fuego. Anyway, we went through there, and then we went to the Falkland Islands, which are called Las Malvinas by the Argentines. This gives you another view of that. So this is a typical chart. This was something we would see every day, projected on a TV screen in the reception area. So here's Ushuaia. This is the Beagle Channel right here. At the time, we were right there, and we went between the Point San Diego and the San Antonio Islands, which are here, and headed up north east toward the Falkland Islands. This is our first view of the Falklands. Most of the vegetation you see there in the foreground is what's called tussock grass, and very important for wildlife and nesting and so on. The yellow patches, unfortunately, are gorse. So that's an invasive species that has put a foothold in the Falklands and other islands in the south. Now, the entire 185 people were allowed to go ashore on this one. You can see some of them there. You can see some birds here. This is a little Magellanic penguin colony right there. And then the scattered white dots are upland geese, kelp geese, and perhaps ruddy-headed geese in there as well. But you can see the tussock grasses. This was a different location but you can see the landing was pretty easy. The waters were smooth. This is a little cove. We didn't actually use the pier, but you can see that it's fairly easy. And then here in the foreground, this is a male kelp goose. Here's a female kelp goose. I'll be talking more about the geese and so on later. So we embarked from that landing, we embarked on a 2-kilometer hike over to an albatross colony, which I'll show you in a minute here. For some people aboard, the 2 kilometers was a bit much. And so there's this couple of Land Rovers that were used to transport people across these moors, so to speak, here on the Falkland Islands. And here's the albatross colony. So here you can see black-browed albatrosses on nests. And also in here you can see some rock hopper penguins as well. So there's a combined colony. Here's a little video showing you what it was like. As you can see, we got really close. You see why they're called rock hopper penguins, that one hopping around there. But later on, I'll show you some close-ups of both the penguins and the albatrosses. Here is another kelp goose, male kelp goose, in front of the little farmhouse that was located at our landing point. And here is a different kind of goose. These are called upland geese. This is a male, that's female, and there's their goslings. And then here in the foreground, these are Magellanic oyster catchers. And that's Steve back there, who's a fish guy, actually. This is the town of Stanley. Stanley is the capital of the Falkland Islands. Now, it turns out that I got a cold while I was there. And it happened to be the day that we arrived in Stanley. there had also been some COVID on board. And so unfortunately, the doctor went to Stanley. And so I couldn't get tested until she came back. So this was from the ship. I was stuck on the ship until she could come back. Speaking of which, about 20 people actually out of the 300 on board got COVID while they were there, and they were required to spend 5 days in isolation in their cabins, typically with their significant others. And I felt really bad for those folks because they're bird watchers, right? And so a lot of you know bird watchers, they have their life list, they have their North America list, their California list, their Moss Beach list, their yard list, and so on. So these folks actually had their porthole list. So what are the birds that they actually saw through their windows of their cabins? Anyway, beautiful place. So here are the Falklands. So we cruised then and took about 2 days to get from the Falklands to this island here. This is South Georgia Island. These are the Sandwich Islands over here. I don't know what those are called right there. And then just for reference, there's the Antarctic Peninsula. So we went from Ushuaia here up through this channel to the Falklands, spent 3 days there, and then 2 days to get to the South Georgia Islands, which was South Georgia Islands, an amazing place. Now on the way there, we went by these pinnacles. They're called shag rocks. The reason they're called shag rocks is because that is the word that is used to describe cormorants in Europe and in South America and so on. In fact, I think North America is the only place where we call that kind of bird a cormorant. But all these birds flying around are South Georgia shags, and they nest on these islands, and it was misty and really, really cool. Here's a little video of some of the land as we approached, of South Georgia Island. So tussock grass. I'm zooming in on a macaroni penguin colony up on the cliff there. And then you can see the brown kelp, the brown algae. There's a shag right there. It's a South Georgia shag. This is a close-up of that macaroni penguin colony, or as close as I could get with my lens, which is a 400 millimeter lens. And here's some, these are Antarctic fur seals. These are all males down here. That looks like that's an elephant seal right there. And then again, the tussock grass, a little waterfall, really beautiful. This is one of our landing points on South Georgia Island. Here again, as we were landing. So most of these are king penguins, and that was really the sort of the focus of our landings in at least in a couple of places in South Georgia Islands. A lot of elephant seals. These are southern elephant seals, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, we were actually able to take a little hike in the footsteps of Ernest Shackleton and two of his shipmates, Tom Crean and Frank Worsley. And if you don't know anything about the Shackleton story, I can't go into it too much because it's a lot and it's really an amazing story. But one of the things they did was they crossed over these mountains after having been on a small lifeboat for 17 days. Took these 3 guys. So there were 6 guys in the lifeboat. 3 of them hiked over to try to find rescue. And they came over these mountains here. So now I think they came down one of these passages, one of these passes here down to these flatlands. When they got here, they heard a whistle of a nearby whaling station. And they followed that, and that's the trail that we were on. So they came up through this valley here and then up this hill. This lake right here is called Crean Lake because Tom Crean actually fell into that lake. And this is at the highest point of this particular ridge. And then they hiked down into this valley. So we are following their footsteps here. And if you look down here, you can see there's the whaling station that they heard the whistle, and where they found rescue relief, basically. And there's our ship, which had left us here in this cove, went around the point, and met us there. Pretty amazing place. This waterfall, at the time they did the little adventure, or it's not an adventure, the desperation move across this South Georgia island, this waterfall was frozen, and using a hemp rope and a carpenter's adze, they climbed down this waterfall to get to the whaling station, which is here. Now, that's been abandoned for many years, as you can see. Here's a look at it from shore. No people are allowed to be on this because it hasn't been rendered safe. There's a lot of mystery liquids and some asbestos and a lot of dangerous things. Now, this little building right here, this was the manager's hut, and Shackleton and his shipmates knocked on the door. The guy opened the door. He's like, "Who are you?" Even though he knew them, he didn't recognize them because of their condition. Now, this is Grytviken, which has actually been restored and is safe for people to walk around in. It has a little post office. There are people that live there. This is the old church. These big tanks were full of diesel, whale oil, and other mystery liquids, but they've been rendered safe, so we could walk around in there. Here's a couple of whaling ships. You can see whale bones scattered around. Here's a whaling ship with newfangled harpoon cannon that they use for the whaling. This is South Georgia Island was a major whaling station point. And there were several stations, like 6 or 7 stations on this island. They have a beautiful little museum there with lots of different things. This is a toothfish, which is a major fishery in that area. And here's a Ernest Shackleton quilt, really cool. This is a replica of the lifeboat that the 6 men spent 17 days in, and actually found this island in the middle of the ocean. Pretty amazing. And Ernest Shackleton actually wanted to be buried on South Georgia Island. This is his gravestone. And there's a kind of he was really into whiskey. And so there's a kind of whiskey called Shackleton whiskey, which we're partaking and doing a little toast to Ernest Shackleton and his buddies. But the main thing was were the penguins there. So this particular colony, oh, by the way, the brown ones are the babies. You can see some that are in molt. I'll show you some more photographs later of that. This particular colony had 80,000 penguins in it. Enjoy for a second here. It's all penguins in the background there as well. King penguins. And then this colony was even bigger. This was 170,000. It turns out that there are larger king penguin colonies on other islands in the southern oceans. You can see some glaciers in that view as well. 2 different colonies that we visited. And then just to give you an idea how close we got to them, that we were actually supposed to stay 5 meters away from any wildlife, but as you can see, sometimes they didn't follow those rules. I think that's our ship doctor there in red. I think this that red kind of threw it off. Note that the parka color, by the way, is the same color as the neck patch and the chest patch of the penguins. That's on purpose. Now, South Georgia Island is really into biosecurity. So here, two things are happening. One is that a crew member washing the guano, the penguin poop, off of our boots so it doesn't get moved from place to place. And then after that, we step into this tray that's full of a viricide. So that's to prevent avian flu from being transmitted. We also had to make sure that our packs and our boots and so on had no vegetative material in it at all. So they're trying to prevent any kind of invasive species. South Georgia Island, by the way, they've eradicated, unfortunately using poison, but they've totally eradicated all rats from the island, which is pretty phenomenal. All right, so finally, our last stop was the Antarctic Peninsula and the South Shetland Islands. Here's our route. So we came from the South Georgia Island down here. We went through this little passage here called the Antarctic Sound into the Erebus and Terror Gulf, down to Snow Hill, back to this island, which is called Paulette Island, and then onto the west side of the Antarctic Peninsula. We made 4 different landings there, and then finally we went to the South Shetland Islands here, and then across the Drake Passage back to Tierra del Fuego. A lot of pretty pictures of Antarctica. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. I did want to show you this little video of the ship going through some icy waters. Now listen for the ship hitting the ice. So again, a testament to our captain for being able to go into these kinds of waters. And again, we just had extraordinary weather. You know, the fact that we had calm waters, that we could see reflections, you know, blue sky, dramatic scenes. It was just phenomenal. Really amazing. But also we wanted to see penguins colonies. So this is an Adelie penguin colony. These are Gentoo penguins. The red, so we were lucky because we went fairly early in the season and most of the penguins were not very dirty yet. Later on, as the snow melts, they get particularly dirty from the penguin poop and from the mud that's in the areas. Now, the red here indicates that these penguins were eating krill. The red on the rocks is lichen. These are Gentoo penguins here. And again, you can see the red around those penguins. That is krill-laden poop. Lots of Gentoo penguins. We saw 8 species of penguins, by the way. That's an Antarctic tern that was just chirping there. One more view of a penguin colony on Antarctic Peninsula and a load of tourists. Now you can see where the trails were for the people to walk, but also you can see another little trail there. That's the penguin trail. And they had their penguin highways that they used, and we had to be careful. So here's you can see that person walking away. So you can see this is where people crossed. That's where penguins crossed. And there were staff people there that would say, "Hey, hold on, let's let the penguins go across." And so we had crossing guards. This is little wind-up toys on a penguin highway. Very cute. All right. Some more pretty pictures of Antarctica. All right, and then finally we went back we crossed the Drake Passage, which is known for its waves. Now, this is a little bit crazy here, but I want to show you a few things. This is windy.com, which is actually a really good application. I like it a lot. Here's the temperature. So here's where we are, Saturday the 26th. It takes 2.5 days to get from the South Shetland Islands, which are here, to Tierra del Fuego, which is here across the Drake Passage. So you can see it's around 1 or 2 degrees centigrade, so just a little bit above freezing. These two are wind speed, so you can see that the winds would be 35 up to 34 kilometers per hour, so pretty breezy. And then this yellow one right here is the wave height. So look at the wave height. Here we are, 5.8. This is in meters. So up to 7.2 meters. That's 20 feet, people. Let me show you what that's like. Actually, this is probably not even 20 feet. So I took this little video from the back of the ship. Got to tell you, I spent most of the 2.5 days drugged up on a anti-nausea medication called promethazine, and I only ventured out a couple of times. It was a little bit crazy. No, I did not take this photograph, but this gives you an idea. If I had gone to the bow of the ship, this is what it would look like. Crazy. Now, fortunately, we had these are stabilizers. There's one on either side of the ship. They kind of help it to maintain the ability to not list too much. There was still some listing, though, as you can see here. This woman is leaning a bit, walking through, and it was kind of like being in a video game as you're walking through, bouncing from wall to wall with the handrails for support. And then here's coming into Ushuaia again. All right. Then so let me give you a little heads up here. So we got 10 more minutes, and I'm going to be able to get through the last bit talking about Tierra del Fuego. I'm going to do it fairly quickly, but then I'm going to get into some pretty pictures after that. And I'm afraid that's going to be after 4 o'clock. So I wish that that we had a little bit more time, but I'm still going to do it. Show you some pictures of icebergs and some plants and fungi and some animals. So stick around if you can. I hope you will be able to do that. All right. So here's Ushuaia. This is the Beagle Channel. And one of the things I did was I traveled up here to this little town of Tolwyn. And in Tolwyn, this is on this huge lake called the Fagnano Lake. Let me go back to here. So here's the Beagle Channel right here. Ushuaia is about there. And then this big lake, that goes out to there. This big long lake is called Fagnano Lake. It's an Italian family name, but that's this one up here. And now this is the Beagle Channel. This is a little lake called Laguna Escondido, which means hidden lake, on the way to this lake here, which is the Fagnano Lake. Now this is a post office in the Tierra del Fuego National Park. And these are some shots of some of the views there. We walked through some forest land there. These are these trees are called Nothofagus or southern beech. They're actually related to oaks. And the ground cover here is a kind of a fern, but there are also other like orchids and mosses and all kinds of cool stuff. Really beautiful forests there. And there's a little a river that flows through there. Now this right here, this is actually a beaver dam, believe it or not. And beavers were introduced there to be used for fur, but they've become a problem because they build the dams, they flood the flatlands, they kill the trees. So they're actually they're trying to eradicate them, control them, but they're still there. These are some of my traveling companions. This is Narelle from Australia in the middle there, and Jean from Minnesota. Jean was actually on the trip. Narelle I met in Ushuaia. She was yet to go on a trip, a different trip. One of the things we did there was we got on a catamaran like this, Anna B, and went out to see a Magellanic penguin colony. Right behind here is part of the Argentine Navy. One of the things we looked at on the way was this lighthouse. Jules Verne wrote a book called The Lighthouse at the End of the World. That's what this one is named after. There's a imperial shag colony there. These are basically cormorants. This is the Magellanic penguin colony, so that you can see them all up on the beach. This is a different catamaran full of tourists there. And this is what it was like coming back. Oops, sorry. So that's it. We're going right into the waves. Those waves were splashing right up over top of the whole ship. But fortunately, we were all inside, nice and toasty, having our lattes. All right. So now I'm going to just really quickly just show you a bunch of icebergs. There's one iceberg in particular I want to show you that's of interest, and that's this one. This is the largest iceberg on the planet. And it's called A76A. This is A76A right there. This, by the way, is a chart that is used by ship's captains and navigators to make sure that they don't get in trouble. So you can see down here the different colors represent different kinds of ice. So the red is really bad. That's very close drift ice. The orange is not quite as bad. The yellow is open drift ice. The green is very open drift ice, and blue is open water. So you can, and then icebergs are the hash marked ones. So you can kind of see what's going on there. Now, this particular iceberg, A76A, here it is calving off from an ice shelf. When this picture was taken, this length was 174 kilometers. 100 miles from tip to tip. It took us 6 hours to go by this iceberg. And so you can see it here. Now, from the water line to the top is about 250 feet. And if you know anything about icebergs, only about 10% is above water. So you can imagine this thing goes quite deep into down below. So whatever, so 2,000 feet or something like that below the water. Pretty amazing. But we saw lots of other icebergs, some of them with penguins on them. Icebergs are really a really enjoyable part of the trip. There's some penguins on another iceberg. These grooves right here are caused by air bubbles that are underneath the iceberg, either trapped by the calving off process or dissolved oxygen and so on, like becoming bubbles underneath there. And as they bubble up, they melt the ice in these lines. It's pretty cool. Here's our ship. This one here is an iceberg that had a piece of glacier fall onto the iceberg. And so that's why it's this is a Picasso, right? Cubist. All right, so let's talk about plants, fungi, and lichens. And I want to remind you that I'm going to do 2 more sections: the plants, fungi, and lichens, and then by the way, let me back up a little bit. Somebody asked about the war in the Falklands. There are museums on both the Falklands and Stanley, and also in Ushuaia, having to do with the Falkland War. Of course, the British won that, so that's why they call it the Falklands. Okay, let me back up. Let me see here. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so these are some a little ericaceous thing. These are moss. That's a water droplet right there. These are water droplets on this sort of water resistant moss. This is a fern. These are in South Georgia. This also is a moss. Beautiful little Caryophyllaceae. This one is called Burnet. I forgot to check what family it's in. It's the genus is Acaena, A-C-A-E-N-A. Very common all throughout there. There's a lichen. Some more lichens, lots of lichens. Those were in Antarctica. This is the greatest thing, folks. This is, some of you may be familiar with Deschampsia antarctica. This is one of only 2 vascular plants that are native to the Antarctic continent. And we found one. The other one is a type of pearlwort in the genus Colobanthus. But we didn't see that one, but we did, it wasn't me, I wish I could take credit, but somebody did find this little clump of Antarctic grass. Pretty cool. Now this is in Tierra del Fuego. This is a spiny plant called Calafata in Spanish. It had this little parasite growing on there. I think a fungal parasite. Pretty cool. There's a little malve, some other things, a little comp. There's a limnanthes. This is the orchid that was really common throughout the woods in the national park of Tierra del Fuego. Beautiful fern down there, Tierra del Fuego. All right, here we go, folks. Now we're in my wheelhouse. This is a mushroom. It gets to be about that big, and it's called Cyteria, is the genus name, and the Spanish name, the common name, is pan de indio, which means Indian bread. And you can see it all up and through in that tree. And when it grows, it makes these big cankers like that. And I'm checking it out. What's that guy doing? Yum. So it had no flavor whatsoever, and apparently not poisonous. I'm good to go. So I mentioned it makes these cankers. So here's one on a tree, and the local Tierra del Fuegans have actually used that as an architectural feature of a lot of their buildings down there. Pretty cool. That's a slime mold moving across the substrate. All right, finally, last section, folks. These are the wildlife shots. What I'm going to do is I'll talk about first the birds and then the mammals that we saw here. So here is a dolphin gull that is harassing some ducks. I did get some tide pooling in, so I know maybe some of you out there are from Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. This is in South Georgia Island. This is on the Falklands. This is where we went to the albatross colony. That's a sheep's skull right there, and surrounded by green and brown and red algae. You can see some mussels off to the side there. Here's a rock with some some kind of a slipper snail, mostly covering the rock, and then two limpets that are essentially claiming territory. Here's another view of some algae and the rocks. This is at the same place where that pier was, and the geese that I showed you already. This is a kind of gull called a dolphin gull. This is a juvenile subadult, and this is what a full adult looks like. Very common in Ushuaia. They're the most common gull that likes to be fed by people. So it hangs out where the tourists are, and the tourists throw food at them. As you can see, there's a bunch of cigarette butts in the grass here. This thing's waiting for me to feed it. And this was another common gull, the second most common gull species, called a kelp gull. This is a pair that are at the nest. These are Antarctic terns, hanging, one bird, maybe the male, bringing a little tidbit to the female as she's sitting on top of an iceberg. This is a skua. This particular one, I think, is a South Polar skua, which is actually seen in northern waters in the off season, in our summer, their winter. Skuas are well known as pirates of other birds. So they will chase other birds until the other birds give up their food, and then the skuas will eat the food. This is a nesting bird. And then here is a different skua. This is a brown skua, I'm pretty sure, that is sitting on an iceberg. So I showed you a Magellanic oyster catcher earlier. This is another type of oyster catcher whose name cracks me up. This is the blackish oyster catcher. Not completely black, apparently, but blackish. And as also pretty common in Tierra del Fuego. Some of you may recognize this if you've been to South America at all. This is a southern lapwing. In Europe, there's a northern lapwing, which occasionally shows up in Canada, but pretty rare. Really beautiful bird. It's a type of plover. Here's another shorebird. This is a white-rumped sandpiper, which is also seen on the East Coast on a regular basis. Of North America, I should say. This is a snipe. This is a Magellanic snipe. All right, and this is a shoveler. Now, you may be familiar with a northern shoveler. This is a red shoveler. That's a male, female in the background. And there's lots of different kinds of geese. These are upland geese. I showed you these before. This is a male. Males are white. Female, she's always has the brown head. And the goslings. And here's a male up on a tussock grass watching out. There's a female and a male upland geese. This is a female kelp goose. And then these are called, ashy-headed geese. This is a South Georgia pintail, really beautiful little duck. This is a very common duck called a crested duck. That's a male. And these are cool. These are flightless steamer ducks. And here's another one here. And look at the length of the wings there. So you can see the wings are very short. These are unable to fly. There are flying steamer ducks that are closely related to these, but this particular one is a flightless one. And they're called steamer ducks because when they try to get away from a predator or whatever, they're on the water. They move through the water like a steamer ship, like a steamship. Pretty cool. Some of you may recognize this. This is a juvenile black-crowned night heron. And there's an adult right there. Pretty cool. Found from Tierra del Fuego all the way through North America. Is also pretty common in Europe, and we've seen them in Asia as well. These are black-faced ibises in Tierra del Fuego. These are really cool birds, but really hard to identify. They're in a group called prions. They're a kind of a tube nose, so they're related to shearwaters and petrels. They're about 6 species or 8 species, something like that, and they're mostly identified by the length of their bill. And so you have to really get a good photograph to identify these. These are Antarctic prions, and they're pitter-pattering across the water. You can see the sort of footprints of this one over here, where it's splashed across the water, feeding on plankton, mostly krill. This is a giant petrel. This is a juvenile southern giant petrel. Here's an adult southern giant petrel. By the way, see the little drop of water there? These are in the tube nose group. And this tube right here is actually a salt extracting mechanism. So these birds can live in salt water. This nasal structure here basically extracts water out of the salt, which creates a very, very briny, higher concentration than the water salt droplet that then goes down to the tip of their beak, and you can see it right there. Pretty cool. And this is another northern giant petrel. By the way, the only difference between a northern giant petrel and a southern giant petrel, this is a southern, is the color of the tip of the beak. That's tough. This is a Cape petrel. It's a really beautiful bird, really great photogenic petrel species. You can see that tube right there. It's part of the tube nose group. And here's a whole bunch of Cape petrels and one southern fulmar down there. And here's another southern fulmar. If you've ever taken pelagic trips in Northern California, you'll see northern fulmars, another tube nose. And then this is one of the albatrosses. This is a light mantled albatross, arguably the most striking, beautiful albatross out there. Here's a pair of them flying together, one with the giant A76A behind it. This is a gray-headed albatross. It's hard to see, but there's a little yellow stripe that runs right down the top of its beak right there. You can kind of see it right there as well, gray-headed albatross. And then this is the black-browed albatross, which was the most common albatross we saw on from the ship as well. But this is at the colony. And you can see this one actually has an egg right there. This is a mud nest. You can see the mud nest that they've made, and there's an egg. Here's some close-ups of some black-browed albatrosses. Very photogenic bird. Here's a couple of them in love. Now this, I'm sorry, it's not a very good photograph. This one and that one there are wandering albatrosses. And this is the bird that has the superlative of having the longest wingspan of any bird on the planet. That's 11 feet. So this is really cool to see a few of these out there flying over the water. All right, now the penguins. So this is a Magellanic penguin that we saw on the Falkland Islands. And I noticed this bird, and I was kind of walking over there and kind of looking down, and it's like, what's it doing? And then the next thing I knew, it was gone. It had disappeared into its burrow. So these penguins, unlike other penguins, nest in burrows in the soil. There's a close-up of a Magellanic penguin. There's one in the water. This is a rock hopper penguin. A rock jumper is a different thing. This is a rock hopper penguin. These penguins were nesting in and amongst the black-browed albatrosses on the Falkland Islands. There's another one there. Now that looks pretty similar, doesn't it? So you can see there's a little difference in the tufts, the ear tufts, and the size of the bill. So this one has a big chunkier bill and more orange in the ear tufts and more robust ear tufts. This one is a macaroni penguin. Now this particular penguin has been seen in this in this chin-strapped penguin colony for years. I'm going to go back to this. That's a chin strap penguin there, and there's another one. All of the penguins you see in the back are chin strap penguins, but this macaroni penguin thinks it's his chin strap penguin. And they've been seeing him for years. I think his name is Carl, something like that. This is an Adelie. And so note the white eye ring, short bill. It actually has a long bill, but the feathers go out far out onto the bill. Very cute little bird. You can see some of that krill infused penguin poop there. And here's some Adelies in action. Hurry up, catch up. There you go. Adorable. This is a Gentoo penguin. So the white patch above the eye and lipstick. Notice how white they are. So again, you know, the fact that the snow was still covering the ground. They weren't lying in penguin poop and mud. Oh, that one fell down. Has made it, oh, it fell down again. Anyway, it made for very photogenic penguins. It's a couple of Gentoos resting on the snow. It's a Gentoo on an iceberg, another Gentoo. Now, this is a Gentoo colony that actually was at the same place where the Magellanic penguins were when we took the boat out to see past the lighthouse and out to the Magellanic penguins. So the captain of the boat called me up because he noticed I had a camera. He called me up to the bridge and he says, "Look out there and look at the babies. Oh, and by the way, there's 2 king penguins there. I want to show you that before I move on. But most of these are Gentoo penguins." And he said, "Look at that one. And then if you zoom in, you can see there it is. There's the little baby penguin. And actually, there's a second one right there that's hard to make out. But this is a cute little Gentoo baby that was there. And he wanted me to see that because the rest of the people were down lower and couldn't see this baby. These are chin strap penguins. Pretty cute. You can see why they're called that. Now check this out. These guys started to just have that. They were, for some reason, I don't know why, they just started calling me, making a racket. Now, a lot of the penguins, including the chin straps, the Gentoos and the Adelies, they nest in rocky ground, and the males bring these rocks from sometimes pretty far away, and they bring it to the nest, and they basically make the nest out of rocks for their sweetheart. So here's a guy, it's a male, bringing it up there. There's his mate, and he drops the rock, and then he's going to go get another one, maybe just as far. Here's the same guy, same male, chin strapped with a big rock. Now, he didn't make it all the way to the nest with this one, as I recall. Now, this one, note this one here in the foreground. Here's some people talking. So this one's going to go over there. He's going to literally steal a rock from somebody else's nest. Another one. And then he's going to bring this over to his own mate. Now, I don't know if you heard in the people talking, woman said, see, he just put that rock that he stole at his mate's nest. But I don't know. He kept doing that on several times. But the woman said, there he did it again. So here's some pretty pictures of some king penguins. These two guys are lifting their feet up off the ground for thermal regulation. I'm pretty sure that's what they're doing. Here's some king penguins behaving badly. Turns out that the one in the front that's sort of ignoring the other two is a female. The other two that are hitting each other and pecking each other are males that are vying for her attention. We saw that quite a lot, actually. Now, again, remember that the brown ones are the babies. They sure don't look happy, do they? Now, here's one that's in interesting molt. There's another one, it's got like a tunic. Now, here's a couple of adult penguins that are feeding the juvenile, the penguins. Again, these are kings. So you can see this one, the juvenile basically has almost its whole head up into the crop of the penguin, the adult penguin, where it's feeding and regurgitating fish that it caught. Here's some swimming king penguins, and then here's some more. Many of you have probably seen underwater views of penguins underwater. They're really fast, really can basically fly underwater. All right, guess what these are? Emperor penguins. What? We found them. We actually saw some emperor penguins. And it turns out that over the course of an evening, and remember we were pretty far south, so it stayed light most of the night basically, but some people stayed up until midnight, and they ended up counting 27 emperor penguins. I myself only saw 4, but I was able to get a photograph of a couple of them on the ice, and so that was the buzz of the ship. Everybody was super happy about that. And it was a lot of credit had to go to the captain, because he went to a part of the Antarctic Peninsula where we really shouldn't have been going, but he did it anyway. He did it safely, and he got us this far south to see them. All right, so that's the penguins. Now moving forward, these are some shags. These are probably South Georgia shags. This one has some seaweed, and that's what they use for their nesting material. There's a close-up of a shag. They're sometimes called the blue-eyed shag group, and you can see why. There's some more. These are imperial shags over on, oh, sorry, these are Antarctic shags. You can see the penguins in the background. This is called a snowy sheathbill. There's only 2 species of sheathbills. They're in their own family, and they're real curious, and they will hop up on, this is a pile of equipment in one of our landings. And so they'll hop up and they'll check out the parts. Check that out. That is an Andean condor, and it's on an island by that lighthouse that I showed you. What's it doing there? Well, we think that it was just hanging out, waiting for some of the cormorants to die. You can see in the foreground here a couple of eggs. Those are not condor eggs. The condor eggs would be much, much bigger than that. They're probably shag eggs, and there's a lot of shags around there, but not around the condor. I was not expecting that, I gotta say. This is a caracara. This is a Chimango caracara. There's another one. It's a different kind of caracara called a striated caracara. These are actually related to falcons, but they're mostly scavengers. They are not predatory typically. This is a bird called a blackish Cyclodes. It's in its own family. We don't have anything like it in North America. This is a wren. This is a Cobb's wren, I do believe. Here's another wren. This is a house wren. Now, house wrens are, I found this in Tierra del Fuego. So house wrens are pretty common in North America. So another bird that's found from the tip of South America all the way into Canada. This is a thrush related to our robin called an austral thrush. And here's another one. This is a rufous collared sparrow. Isn't that cool? This is a meadowlark, a long-tailed meadowlark. I would have given it a different name, but that's what it's called. And here's one in a gorse bush with an upland goose in the foreground. But that striking contrast is pretty amazing. All right, now finally to the mammals, and I'll get through this pretty quick. I'll be done by 4:30. This is a gray fox. I'm not sure if it's the same species as what we have. I think it's different, but we saw that pretty well. Humpback whale. Not a very good shot, I'm afraid. This is from one of the zodiacs. There it is doing its dive. And there were at least two. Well, actually, we saw many, but I got photographs of at least two. Here's one, and here's another. Remember that you can tell that their undertails are like fingerprints. These are called Commerson's dolphins that were following the ship for a little while. And then we saw various types of pinnipeds. This is a Weddell seal. Here's another one up close. It's the only, and it's not the only seal. This is the other seal that we saw. This is a southern elephant seal. Many of you are familiar with the northern elephant seals from Año Nuevo or San Simeon and so on. These guys are half again as big. I've seen that they can get up to be 8,000 pounds. I'm a little skeptical about that, but they certainly are bigger than the northern elephant seal. In fact, these are the biggest pinnipeds on the planet. And there were quite a lot of them, quite a few of them. Here's a wiener, little weaned pup sitting in a river. And then here's an alpha bull and a bunch of females. The females are complaining about his movements. And then in the foreground are some pups and weaners. And then in the background here, you can see some more males and other elephant seals. Lots of elephant seals. And then this is the Antarctic fur seal. This is a male. They call the males beach masters. And you can see them before I start this video. You can see them all along the beaches. Now they would give the staff would give us poles, walking poles, and they said that if a beach master lunged toward you, just stick the pole out. It'll smell the pole, and then it'll turn its back on you, and you'll be fine. So here's two having at it. So that's typical of what they do. Let me show you one more time. They lunge at each other and then they turn their back. Pretty crazy. Sorry. Another shot of a fur seal. This is a fur seal family. So there's a male, there's a female, and there's a pup. This is on South Georgia Island. And here is my last slide. And thank you so much for hanging in there, those of you who did. And I'd be happy to take any questions or comments. So you can do that by doing the Q&A down at the bottom or the chat if you prefer.
Hi, JR. Thanks ever so much. And let's see what we've got here. Got a question. Was there, someone who's anonymous is saying, was there any remaining evidence of the war that took place in the Falklands?
Right. Yeah, I caught that question a little bit earlier, and there's some. Thank you, Jean. There's some museums. There's museums in Ushuaia and on the Falklands themselves about the war, and as you can imagine, there's some sort of some anger from the Argentines about the Falkland War. They figure that they should have had they should have been ceded the Falkland Islands, since they're a lot closer to Argentina than they are to Britain. Thank you, Susan. Michael, yeah. I did not. Most of the photos the videos are all from my iPhone, and the photos are either from my iPhone or from the big camera that you saw as a Canon Mark II.
That was some camera.
Yeah. Well, so I had just purchased that lens, which is a 100 to 400 millimeter lens. So I had a lot of fun with that. So this photograph, for example, is from that, and a lot of my photographs. But that iPhone did pretty amazing, did really well. The panoramic shots, those are from the iPhone. Yeah.
May I ask which iPhone it is?
13.
13. Yes, they've
iPhone,
improved them a lot.
iPhone 13, iPhone Pro 13. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara. Martin asked why they're called macaroni penguins. Good question. I never figured that out. My guess is that there's somebody out there named Macaroni who for whom it was named after, but I'll have to do some research into that. Thanks, Mike, for your for saying it's a great presentation. We will be posting the recording, right, Mila?
Yes. In about 2-3 weeks, we'll have it on our website.
You're welcome, Mick. Thanks for your comment. Yeah.
So this whole idea about getting onto Antarctica, does that take special permission?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Mila. I forgot to mention that. So yes, it does take the Falklands, not so much, but South Georgia Island and the Antarctic Peninsula and the South Shetlands, you have to have permission, and basically the expedition, the Quark people, Quark expeditions, last year made reservations for landings at all of the places that we landed in those islands and then on Antarctic Peninsula. So, for example, if we visited a certain beach or an island in the morning, then another cruise ship was going to perhaps visit that same beach in the afternoon. So you couldn't say, well, sometime on that such and such a day, we're going to go there. You have to be there on time. And there were some situations where we had to change our itinerary a little bit, and they were able to get the reservations because no one else had booked it. But there was a circumstance where we had to change the schedule because someone had booked it, some other ship had booked it. And for most of the places, again, on the South Georgia Island, Antarctic Peninsula, and South Shetland Islands, you could only have 100 people on shore at a time at each landing. So what they would do is they would bring half of the ship to the landing. You go and walk amongst the penguins or the albatrosses, and then you go back, and then you do a tour of the cove or the bay or whatever in the Zodiacs, and then half of the group would reverse that. So they do the tour, what they call the Zodiac tour first, and then when the other people were coming back, then they would go on the island. So it was quite logistically, it was quite an effort. Yeah.
So they were waiting on the Zodiacs, or they were waiting on board?
So it depended, but for the most part, because the weather was good, half of the people would be on shore, amongst the penguins.
Right.
The other half would be in Zodiacs, cruising around, taking pictures of the shore, maybe checking icebergs for seals or penguins, things like that. So just cruising, but not landing, and then they'd switch.
Taking turns, yes.
taking turns.
Okay, let's see. I think there's something else. Oh, well, Michael Hunt says great stuff. Thanks. So
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, so Sharon, you know, during the wintertime, there are no tours of the of Antarctica. It's just too much ice, too much snow, too much ice. So it's only during the summer. So we were one of the first tours to go out, and we left the second week of November. So I think there was like one or two ships that had left, that had gone out and come back before we left, right? So we were sort of like the second round, but they're continuing until now, right through February, I'm pretty sure, and then pretty soon they'll stop. So that's the season. So basically November to February. And then your other question was about the government, which controls the landings on Antarctica. So as you may know, Antarctica, there's a treaty that no one is allowed to own land. No country is allowed to claim land or own land on Antarctica. However, there's about I think 15 different countries, including the United States, Argentina, France, Britain, Russia, all have like slices of the pie, if you will. So you can kind of look at Antarctica and they've cut it up into different slices, and they're different size slices. Anyway, each of those countries, those dozen or so countries, is allowed to put research stations on there, but that's all they're allowed to do in terms of building is research stations. And so, so the permission, I'm not really clear about that, but I think it has to do with that there is a governing body that regulates tourism, regulates the biosecurity, right? So making sure that invasive species don't get on the continent, things like that, fisheries.
So yeah, because of that grass, one of those two vegetative grasses that you say are found on Antarctica, you sort of had to have your feet there.
Yeah, those are pretty hardy things, actually. So it turns out that Antarctica has lower precipitation than any other place on Earth. So it's
Really?
considered a desert.
Really?
Yeah, even though there's glaciers there, right?
Right.
It's just that the snow, as it accumulates on a glacier, even though it accumulates very slowly, there's not very much during the course of a winter. It doesn't melt either because it's cold most of the year. It was 0 degrees most days when we were there. So the snow and ice accumulates, but it stays, but it doesn't accumulate very fast. And anyway, going back to that, there are many parts of Antarctica that are actually bare ground. And so these vascular plants and lichens and a bunch of other things actually do quite well. They're not very abundant, and there's probably not a real issue with invasive species on Antarctica per se, but they still undergo biosecurity. Thank you, Bing. So the other native plant is a pearlwort, Colobanthus quitensis. Here, I'll actually write that in the chat. Yeah, and I neglected to look up what family that is. I think I got that right. Yeah, Colobanthus quitensis. So so that's your homework, Bing, right? Is to find out what family that pearlworts are in. So, but yeah, this Champsia, I've known about this Champsia for a long time. So I was so thrilled to see that, actually. It was almost as thrilling as the emperor penguins and the
Coelenterates.
Cyteria fungus. So,
Potensis. Wow. Okay.
yeah, I don't know what that means. Quito, I guess. Quito, Ecuador.
Key,
Usually if something ends in ENSIS, that means a place.
okay. All right. So, what else have we got?
Any other questions?
Well, I think,
Okay.
oh, chat is disabled? No, the chat's working. It's there. If you wish to put something in chat, by all means do so. We haven't disabled anything. It's just that the questions were asked to be placed in Q&A and comments and other things in chat, but it's not disabled, Vernon.
Bing, were you able to see that chat? I can type it into the answer here too.
Perhaps, yeah,
Have to press on chat.
he can't see chat either.
Here,
Let's
Oh, that-
see, what's wrong with
here.
chat?
there you go. There's, yeah, so,
Yeah, go
all right, well, I put the answer,
Let's see if
I
it's
put the answer in the Q&A.
no,
So it
It
doesn't,
says, well, it says to show chat.
oh, you know what? You know what I did? Or it's only for host and panelists, the chat. It's set for that, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. I put the answer in the Q&A.
Ah,
Yeah, there we go.
okay, sorry, folks. I wasn't privy to that. I certainly didn't disable anything.
Yeah, if you look down the bottom there, it says there are two choices, host and panelist and you.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay, so it's now in Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go, folks.
so I answered Bing's question where he asked it.
I'll just, your own common questions on my screen. All right, so anyway, I think with all due respect and all the time that JR has been talking and showing his wondrous trip, and I'm glad he went and not me. But you can show, we can all well understand how much of a birder and a naturalist he is. I mean, I have no idea how he managed to take photos and videos of everything he did. But JR, that was absolutely stupendous. And thank you so very much for
Thank you.
sharing your trip with all of us.
Thank you. All right, it was good to that everybody joined me. I appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
All right. Good night and thank you.
Hey, good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Mila.
Well, you're quite welcome and thank you.
Okay, we'll see you down the road.
Righto, absolutely. Okay, bye. And then. So I'm closing the webinar, folks. It's the end finally, but it's been terrific. Glad all of you could stay.